And now we're here.
Yay!
We stopped on this slide yesterday. Where we're discussing small office, home office, SOHO networks, medium to large networks. Remember, this is under 50 employees. 50, and then above 50 is a large network. And then, excuse me, and the school is a large network, yes. The school district runs the third largest network in Yolo County. Can anyone name the first two? UC Davis is number one with over 35,000 users at any given time and almost 100,000 separate devices. What's number two? Police departments are not. Remember, those are subsidiaries of larger entities. What entity is number two? Woodland Community College is like 9th or 10th. It's actually relatively small. Okay. Who is that owns and runs that? What? No. The county government. County of Yolo runs the second largest network in the county. They also run the largest geographical network because it stretches for the entire county. Gee, wow, a county network stretches the entire county. Ooh, you never would have guessed that.
It's magnificent.
I'm getting punchy as I get tired. All right, so Woodland Schools is the third largest. Anyone want to venture fourth? I just learned who was number 4 recently. 4th and 5th swap places.
Oh man. Oh gee. It's good intense.
CHP Academy. Because they do a test network that rivals the Woodland Schools network. We are about to drop to 4th if they expand anymore. Because CHP is all computer driven. And all of them are based in West Sac. I'm trying to get us a tour. All of them are based in West Sac and at the Academy. It is smaller because there's not as many of them as there are us. But statewide, if I included statewide CHP, yeah. And the state government runs the largest network if you include state CHP and Caltrans together. They run the 4th largest network in the world. CHP plus Caltrans is the 4th largest network in the world.
And that's just California.
Yeah, and they're just in California, well, predominantly in California.
Caltrans is
You'd be surprised where they reach. CHP has offices in other countries even.
What?
It does make sense. Don't try.
Because California is everywhere.
No, what it is that they have offices in other countries because they do investigations.
oh,
It does make sense now as soon as because FBI also has offices in almost every country. All right, so let's move on. Worldwide networks connect the world together, blah, 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 blah. Let's move. Clients and servers work together to provide you what you need. You could have distributed, and this is the upper left here, a file server and a web server and an email server as 3 separate boxes. And so an email client will connect to the email server, a browser client will connect to the web server, a file access client will connect to the file server. I could also combine them, and that's what you see in the lower right, where one physical machine is operating for email and web and file. Why would I want that? What's the benefit? Fewer computers you have to deal with. Yeah, it's cheaper. If they're powerful enough, it won't slow you down any, but it's significantly cheaper. You're purchasing and securing one box instead of 3. It's as simple as that. And so your file access, web browser, and web browser, you have a couple of these that have 2 or 3 running. They're all hitting the same server at once, and it's fine so long as you have a powerful enough server on the other end. Which of these do you think the school district uses? Which method? Upper left or lower right?
Lower right.
Lower right, exactly. And most organizations will use the lower right simply because it's cheaper, it's easier to maintain. There was a time when it took so much processing power for each of them, you did want them isolated. You wanted only web servers for web traffic, only email servers for email services, only file servers. We do mix and match a little. Now, I will say this. The public web server of the district is its own machine. Why?
You get more traffic.
Gets more traffic is number one. Number two? And that's an important number one. Gets more traffic. We don't want it to slow down the other stuff. What's number two? Security. We have to lock it. It's open to the public. Hence the public web server part that I said. It's open to the public. We don't want regular or irregular people messing with it. If they attack the web server, that's one thing. If that's also the same physical box as our file server, they can break into the web server. They now have our confidential files.
Which is very, very bad.
That would be bad, yes. That's why we don't do it. So that's from a physical standpoint, it's a security issue. Ask your question, Ben.
There's always a way, though.
There's always a way. We're slowing people down. We're not preventing them. You're right, Ben. A determined thief will be able to steal, regardless of what security precautions you put in place. Yeah, we could somehow do it, worm our way in. Yes, it can be done. Could you have a perfectly secure network?
No.
There is one way.
Just a box. Just a computer in a room with nothing.
Locked. A locked room.
Yes.
A computer in a locked room, unplugged, is the most secure and really the only way of securing. Past that, or short of that, you are going to have some security risks you mitigate. No, that's less secure because you never know who has the pieces.
Also lock it.
Lock the broken pieces?
Yes, you lock the broken pieces.
It's in a sealed box.
In a sealed box.
In several vaults.
In fact, actually, just
Let's move on. So that's client-server networks. The other alternative is peer-to-peer networks. This is what you probably have at home if you have any sort of networking at all. Instead of a dedicated server, you'll have your regular server or your regular computers that operate and share certain things. So for instance, this center machine that says I have a printer to share is physically connected to the printer, but someone uses that all the time every day as their regular workstation. Maybe this is your dad's computer. Sits on his desk and it shares the printer to everyone. Maybe the file server is your mom's computer, and that's where, because she said so, you have to keep all your music and your media, so she can lock you out of it when she doesn't want you to. Never mind the fact that you know the passwords. That's not important for this conversation. Yeah, that's not important for this conversation. I know yes.
You don't have your own computer.
In this example, if you want video files, you go to the file sharing machine. If you want to print something, you have to go through the printer sharing machine, but those are otherwise used by regular people. In small offices, this can be very useful. Under 15 people, that can be useful if you're not hammering your equipment too much, if you're not putting tremendous demands on the print server and the file server. As soon as you have significantly greater demand, this breaks down and you want the prior example where you have a dedicated server for it. In this example, I could share a very cheap printer with the network. It doesn't have to have networking. Now I know you're going to say, well, Mr. Bain, printers now have networking built in. Yeah, even the cheap ones do. It's really great.
Very convenient.
It's very convenient. It's a great thing. I love it, and it drives me nuts because it's a security risk.
They store the last 10 files.
Some printers do save older files, that's true, but that's not the security risk.
The security risk is that it's not printable. There's no authentication really on default.
There's no encryption and authentication to do what?
Access.
It's not the printing that's the key. To access it, you now are putting a device on your network that has no security. If someone were to break through just enough to see it, and many of them are cloud printers, so there is a way.
They can print 450 pictures of Nick Cage out of a printer.
Oddly enough, your 450 pictures of Nick Cage is not a security risk. It's weird, but it's not a, and very annoying,
Then you have
but it's not a security risk. A security risk is this. Let's say that I stored my tax returns on a machine, and because it's connected inside my network, I never bother to put a password on it because I never take it home. I never take it out of my network. So it's just me and the people who I know who come into my house. I don't put a password on it. Well, I now put that on a machine. Someone breaks into my printer, and they now have access to my network. Because my printer is on the network, and because it's on the cloud, and I could print from afar to my printer. And this is how Google Chrome works for printing. It's how your iDevices print. It's how your Android devices print. It's the same thing. That's all I'm talking about. Good devices. I own one. So, the key is, there can be problems when you put stuff on your network. And it's not printing things so much as the fact that you've opened up your network to other things, Noemi. Not sure. We want her to stay alive. We want to kill the fly. All right. So, these are really great ways of doing it. I had a client a few years ago who had a cheap inkjet printer for color. They didn't do a lot of color work printing photos, and it was almost always photos. They didn't have a lot of it. They didn't need a lot of it. And so they didn't need a high-end color printer. But they all needed to have access to it, and they had this cheap printer. They put it on one of the machines and connected it to their network and shared it.
Did it work happily ever after?
After I fixed it, it worked. And last time I talked to them, it was still running. So once you fix it, it stays fixed. These are my clients I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
So yes, I'm sure. This is my client. They told me it's fixed. It stayed fixed. That's why they had hired me in the first place, is to make sure it got fixed right finally and stayed fixed. And that's exactly what did happen. I'm not being facetious. I'm being very literal. All right, so advantages. It's really easy to set up. It's very simple. Even your grandma can do it. Even a freshman could do it. It's lower cost because you've already got the devices, and they can be cheap devices. And simple stuff, simple file sharing, simple printers and cheap printers, it's really a great way. Downside, there is no central administration. And so there's no centralized backup, there's no central security, there's no one setting it to make sure that the antivirus runs. There's no central point. It's harder to back up. It's not as secure. It doesn't scale beyond 15 total devices. If you have more than 15 devices, and I think your curriculum may say 30, but if you have more than 15 devices on a peer-to-peer network, everything will be slow because each one is saying, I have this to share, I have this to share, and after a while those sharing things just get annoying. And every single machine that is acting as both a server, whether it's a print server or a file server, and a client will be just a little bit slower. And it adds up. And sometimes if a lot of people are trying to print at once, or if a lot of people are saving files or opening files, it can slow down that machine such that it's not going to be useful for them. Question or comment? Okay. And so it's a balance. That's why so often we use the client-server model just to take the load off of those other machines. Client-server is more expensive. That's something to remember because you're buying a lot more equipment. Let's move on to LANs and WANs and Internet. We categorize devices into three pieces. Devices that connect, media, which is the wires, and services which are provided by the network. So things which we plug into the network, how we plug them in together, and then what we get from it, what we get over it.
So when we see media, think
Wire.
wire, not cartoons.
Yes.
Got it.
Cartoons are entertainment.
Cartoon would be services in this example, because that's the actual product being transmitted. The media, or medium for singular, is how it's transmitted, the wire or wireless radio. End devices are your computers. This includes your tablets. It's not up there. It includes your servers. It includes everything. We have probably right now 40 end devices in this room that are operational right now. It might be 45, but I know of 40 off the top of my head that I can number. Network printers, and I have 2 of those in the room. Those are end devices. I actually have 3, but I only have hooked up 2. VoIP phones, voice over IP, so my telephone is an end device. Because it's voice over IP, at least in theory, we also could set it on my computer so I could use my computer's speakers and microphone to place and receive calls in addition to my phone, the physical phone. Telepresence endpoint, I don't have one of those. That would be the camera and other associated equipment to do telepresence. We talked about telepresence yesterday.
Or at least we think there is.
I don't have telepresence in here. I can do web conferencing, but I don't have telepresence because I don't have the high-def cameras.
How much would it cost to outfit this room with telepresence?
To put a simple telepresence system in here is about $2.5 grand.
That's nothing.
That's
Pocket change, yes. And actually, that would be one that we could all participate. If I wanted a one-to-one or a small group telepresence, I could do that for probably $0.5 grand.
These are already services for rent for you, like Google Hangout or Skype.
Yes, and those would be web conferencing, which is lower definition and not as immersive.
I can't believe you only went through the first 14 slides of this whole thing.
Okay, the difference between the difference between web conferencing, like I had this morning on a Google Hangout, and telepresence is how immersed you are in it.
Oh, okay.
I had to wear a microphone this morning. The person on the other end had a microphone on her desk, I think. I didn't see the mic, but I was wearing this one. I was listening to the speakers in my room, and it worked. She could see me from the standard def webcam on my computer. Telepresence, done properly, I forget that you're not in the same room with me. It's a much larger screen, and you could argue that I could have put it up there and been on the large screen. Yeah, you would win that.
So you solved the problem with the whole barrier to entry with that little finding this little webcam.
Right, and so I would need a better camera, and I would need a better microphone system, because a telepresence is designed for multiple people. I couldn't use this. This is a single person mic, and it only picks up, and it actually directionally is very limited to what it picks up on purpose. And so it's not as immersive. Whereas with a true telepresence, I'm not quite sure where the mic is because I don't need to know. I just talk and it comes out the other end. And it automatically adjusts for everything else. Do you see the distinction I'm making? Yeah. I spent 15 minutes adjusting my mic today and it still barely worked. She could hear me because she turned her volume up.
I think you achieve what I'm saying. Less than $2,000.
But I said for a small system, I could do it for probably 500.
Oh, okay.
$2 grand would be a system that we could all share, and that would be a larger screen and a full high-def camera system designed for this size room. I could pull that. Used to be 40 grand. I can pull it off for $2,000 today. And I'm actually going to price that unit that I saw last summer. Now that you mention it, remind me. We'll make Westberg remind me to price that unit. Okay. All right. Telepresence endpoints. Security cameras are on our network. They're end devices. We have them all over. I think they added another 4 or 5 this summer. Mobile handhelds. And in this case, it says smartphones and tablets and PDAs. But I want to talk about wireless debit and credit card readers. This is an application which was not predicted. When Steve Jobs produced the iPad,
Square, right? Or not Square.
yeah. When Steve Jobs produced the iPad, people didn't expect it to take off because it was different than what they were expecting. He turned out to be right, that time was right for a tablet. He had done a tablet before. For those who ever tell you, oh, the iPad was the first tablet or wasn't the first tablet, yeah, nobody ever said it was. That's a Sinclair back in the 80s. It was awful. Or Apple's Newton in the 90s, which had a lot of potential but didn't have enough computing power to do it.
What did they expect?
There's a lot of morons in the world. They expected it.
No, I mean like when you said how did they expect?
The world was not predicting that he would release a tablet. And his own marketing folks said it'll never sell.
What had they been thinking to sell?
Another laptop.
MacBooks.
Yeah, it was another MacBook that was predicted. And it turns out Steve Jobs said, no, I want to do this. It's going to sell. And the marketing folks said, no, it's never going to sell. Nobody wants that. And the marketing folks were wrong again. It happens. They're richer than we are, though. But now, and this was, again, unexpected, Square and several other providers figured out how to use the sound in and out as a modem. That's on the headset port of your devices. Originally, in iDevices, and I know it exists for Android too, they put a card sweeper, and they connected that to the sound. It's like, why is that sound? Well, it turns out it works. And it operated a lot like the old analog modems from a generation ago. It's the same technologies, and they just applied it to credit card readers. And now you have Square, and several stores only have these. I know Apple does only that, but they're not alone. There are other stores which only use credit card readers over their mobile devices. Ask. Okay. No? Okay.
Isn't there also like a lot of potential for security risk there?
There's significant potential for security risk. You have to be really, really cautious when you're dealing with security risks. Security is a big deal, and that's where we're going to stop. Because I'm tired, and so are you. And even Noemi would agree that she wants me to stop talking, and she loves it when I give more lectures. Go with that. Please read your curriculum. We're in section 1.2. You should have read through this point in your curriculum by the end of the period. Go.